Hey everybody, I'm Tommy and you are on the boat. Roberta, good to see you. Jess Joan, here you are. The newest nut. Barbara Waite, I am glad you're here from Michigan. You know that is a slang term for Michoacan among the fellas from south of the border in prison. They'll say, where are you from? And they'll say Michigan. And they don't mean Michigan, they mean Michoacan. So curious on what is going on. Stick around. I promise I will tell you. Pretty weird stuff coming. Renee B, good to see you. Disclosure, Aaron, what's happening? This, people, is this is getting interesting. Now, by way of full disclosure, a lot of what we're hearing these days that is breaking through TMZ. That always has to be taken not with a grain of salt. Hey, Meredith Lynn, because they do report things that are happening. However, these days, there almost always seems to be an agenda tied to it. And the news that is coming out currently about Nick Reiner is changing the narrative even more. Obviously, everyone is talking about why Alan Jackson stepped down. Let's go over this because it's getting speculated ad nauseum, right? I promise you, when it all comes out in the wash, this is going to have to do with money. West Coast Fancy Nancy, good to see you. Hey, Carlos, glad you're here. Because here's what it comes down to. The retainer for somebody like him could be as much as $500,000 to get through the arraignment. Think about that for a second. You haven't even been hired. You haven't been given a retainer. But it's going to run you $500,000 to get through what happened yesterday. I think that there's a pretty decent chance that this comes down to money. A lot of people are reaching out and saying to me, well, there could be a conflict of interest because if the kids are related to the victim, that's not a conflict of interest. If you kill my brother, I can hire the defense attorney to represent you. If my brother kills my mom, I can hire the defense attorney for my brother. Those aren't conflicts of interest. Classic conflicts of interest for defense attorneys come into play when, like, let's say I'm in the process of selling a very large piece of property, and I'm selling that large piece of property to a friend. And now I am representing someone who is associated with that. Do I think it's likely that Nick confessed? I don't know that if we believe what I'm about to get into, GM, I don't think that there's a really good chance that that's the case. However, this is one of those situations where I promise you this isn't a conflict of interest. That isn't what this is. And I'll tell you why. Because before a defense attorney takes a case, right? He gets a phone call. He's in New York. This is how the story goes. He's in New York working on a case. He's doing his thing. He gets the phone call about Michelle and Rob Reiner being murdered and Nick needing an attorney. He drops everything and he comes out there. Before he takes 8 minutes into this, he's going to begin to look for conflict of interest. As the case progresses and he realizes there's a party at Conan O'Brien's, all of these different things, he has to start looking for conflicts of interest. It is what attorneys do before they take a case. They make sure that none of the principals involved, hey, Marilyn, hey, Judy Jetson, they make sure that there is not a conflict of interest of any kind. If he has relationships that are going to cause him to act differently, most of the classic examples they give you, some of them have to do with insurance, all kinds of things. If Romy Reiner didn't want him to be representing the brother, but Jake did, Jake could still pay for it. That's not a conflict of interest. It's a bummer for the family, but conflicts of interest have nothing to do with offending people. It has to do with tainting the process. If you're going to treat this differently because you don't want the guy to raise the price on the land you're about to buy, that's a conflict of interest. If you're banging somebody in the prosecution and you are going to be the defense attorney, that's a problem because the two of you can get together at night and have a conversation about what's going on. People have brought up the fact that his wife works in the prosecutor's office. She has zero to do with this kind of case. She works in family law. This wouldn't be a conflict of interest there. Angie Mo, the dog mom. Good to have you here. If a conflict of interest does arrive, it doesn't mean they're kicking you out. Kevin Hawthorne, Lakeland, Florida. I'm glad you're here, brother. You know, people give me crap for saying hi to you guys. I get it all the time in comments. Don't really care. This is one of those situations that this isn't going to be a conflict of interest. This is going to be financial. The comments that have come out of the Reiner family, the surviving members of the Reiner family, have said things like they're looking for justice. What they want in this is justice. I don't know what the hell that means, to be really honest with you. right? Maybe it means that they want their parents' murderer to be prosecuted, but they don't want to see their brother spend the rest of his life in prison when what he probably needs is a psychiatric institute or psychiatric facility or something along those lines. But it is one of those things that is going to be difficult. As this starts going forward and he's communicating with the family, this is one of the reasons that people get fired. If he starts talking and says, listen, honestly, the way your parents handled your brother, if they had done X, Y, and Z, there's a good chance that he wouldn't have ended up the way he did. The surviving siblings could have gone, you know what? No, I don't think I want the most high-powered and best mouthpiece attorney on planet Earth trashing my parents in court. That's the kind of thing that can get you removed. It also could have been that Nick Reiner, Alan Jackson assumed that Nick Reiner was going to be able to pay for this entire case. There is no chance of that happening. And this is really bad news for Nick Reiner on a whole bunch of fronts. Number one, if this was a conflict of interest, more than likely it would have been detected far before he showed up on the 7th of January. And those people that were paying him would have found another really high dollar attorney to make sure that he was represented in court. That didn't happen. He got handed off to the public defender's office. You're facing capital murder. The death penalty is still on the table. And the brother and sister have gone, not quite ready to get another attorney. Might they at some point? They might. They also might spend a lot more time interviewing whoever that lawyer is. Perhaps they were pissed at the amount of press that this is getting. Perhaps they're pissed that if they turn on YouTube or any other channel, you've got people that are saying things about how this could have been a situation that the parents have some form of culpability. Don't shit on me. I'm not saying that they're responsible for any of this. I'm giving you a scenario. It could be very offensive to them if they thought Alan Jackson's defense was going to paint the parents in a bad light. They would interview the next attorney far more in depth if they were the ones who made the call, and I'm not sure that they are. The question, do you think Alan Jackson offered his services or someone sought him out? Here's the deal. I don't think that Nick Reiner made that phone call, right? He was on suicide watch. He wasn't anywhere near a telephone. Doesn't work like that on suicide watch. I promise you it doesn't. You're not communicating with anyone until your attorney shows up. Did he decide, I'm just going to go out there and represent him? That seems far-fetched too. My guess would be that the family hired him and then realized after the fact that this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I was thinking Alan Jackson's only recourse to defend that Nick was not guilty by reason of insanity, and Nick refused. I don't think that Nick is going to refuse that. I don't think that at this point, if they're telling the truth, and who the hell knows if they're telling the truth, but it doesn't seem like Nick really would have been able to make that kind of decision, especially considering this. They're not anywhere close to that. In other words, he wouldn't have been sitting down with Nick at that point and saying, here's our defense going forward. That's honestly something that happens as you are in a better position to sit down and assist in your own defense. Right now, they're talking about whether or not Nick is competent to stand trial. That doesn't mean, is he nuts, right? And I'm not saying that as a pejorative. It's just one of those things that people say. It doesn't mean, hello, Kristen Melinda, good to have you here. What it means instead is that you're not able to aid in your own defense. And if that sounds, odd, there are cases where the attorney sits down and says, listen, you're accused of murder, right? And the guy looks at him and goes, you're an alien, aren't you? Okay, well, that guy's probably not going to do a whole lot to be able to aid in his own defense. There have been cases where the person believed that the attorney was the person that they killed. There are actually like textbook cases of this. Like, how are you here? Didn't I kill you? Okay, that person probably is not going to be able to aid in their own defense. And by the way, that's not a get out of jail free thing. It just means you're going to be shipped off until they get medication or whatever stabilized enough for you to understand so that you can aid in your own defense. Then you're going to go back to court and it's going to proceed forward. There's no get out of jail free for him. I promise you there isn't. Would an attorney share his game plan for the trial to someone else? Absolutely. Now, he would share it with his team. And obviously somebody shared it with Harvey Levin, right? And I think it was one of those situations where the whole world kind of has this one figured out, right? This is the news that came out. Hey, Johnny Scoville, Raspberry Beret, good to see you. This is one of those situations where we already were hearing, listen, this dude went and got a hotel room. This guy, now listen, I promise you you're going to hear this. I promise you you're going to hear this. He was planning on leaving. I know that people think I'm crazy on this. You watch, this will pan out. He didn't pick that hotel where it was at random. He picked that hotel because it was very close to a lot of ways you can get out of town. They're now starting to, TMZ is now coming out, and there is a documentary that is going to come out tomorrow on the Michelle and Rob Reiner murders. Can you believe this? I mean, honestly, they have DMZ has a documentary already ready to go, and this case started on the 15th of December. But they're putting out teasers. They're giving you just enough to try to get you to show up at this. And they're in an interview that he did with Ashley Banfield. Ashley Banfield was saying, after the crime, the guy took off. Allegedly, they can't find the murder weapon. Chicka Cherry Cola, good to see you. If they can't find the murder weapon, right? That kind of shows post-meditation, right? It's like premeditation, but after the murder. He knew he did something wrong. He was trying to get out of Dodge. He was going to go try to clean up. He covered the windows. He showered. He did all these things. And then he was, in the process of going down to get some dope. I believe he was getting ready to leave town, but he wasn't going to do it without some dope. That's my humble opinion. His siblings not paying for a high-dollar attorney may be the first time Nick is seeing some accountability in his life. What a great freaking comment. But picture this. If there is this sort of proof after the fact, Harvey Levin's response was, that's not good enough. You can understand that what you did is wrong and still be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Maybe I'm not very bright, but I read the McNaughton rule inside and out. I probably read it 30 times. There is a caveat that you have to not understand the nature of the crime. I don't understand how you could say, I knew what I did was wrong, but I don't understand the nature of the crime. Those things to me, they're not, they're mutually exclusive. There's no way that you're going to go, yeah, I knew killing him was wrong, but I didn't know that what I did was, didn't make any sense to me. Now, if the case that they will probably give you as an example on this is whether or not the person that, when you killed the person, if you thought you were exorcising the demons or doing something like that for them, or you thought that the person literally, hey, Kathy, if you thought the person literally was taking on someone else, like they were possessed, they were no longer themselves, and they were a threat to you, in theory, right, that means that you don't understand the nature of the crime. But if you know that killing them is wrong, I think that cancels that out. But again, anytime that TMZ starts giving a story these days, there's a narrative that's being pushed, right? Alan Jackson, after he stepped down, before that, big stuff is being made of the fact that he was grinning and kind of laughing with the cops. I don't care what you're charged with. I don't. The stress of going into court is overwhelming. And you, especially if you're coming off of the watch, right? Suicide watch, where you haven't had any kind of conversation with anybody. The cops don't treat you like the movies where they're like, move it, convict. It's just not that way. Normally, they're trying to keep you calm. They're trying to make sure there aren't issues. So they'll go, hey, how you doing, guy? You doing all right? Okay, good, man. We got to take a little trip. We're heading down to the courthouse. Should be painless. We'll be in and out of there quickly. And there's a rapport that starts to build. And as you're sitting there waiting for a process that you don't understand, a process that you've never been through, you're looking for relief of any kind, right? You're looking for any kind of relief. So if the cop goes, hey, man, don't trip. You're going to get through this. I've seen people with way worse crimes than this. I saw a guy that killed 9 people. He came in here. He got through it. You're going to. And if Nick looks at him and goes, any kind of comic relief, every single person in the courtroom is staring at him. And what they want to see is this. They want to see guilt, remorse. He may not be compos mentis at this point enough to actually feel that kind of stuff. It is very confusing. I promise you all of this is confusing, and it's going to get worse in about 3 minutes, right? When I tell you the next bombshell that's going to get dropped. But when they were talking about this post-meditation, all of the things that he did after the crime that would lead you to believe he knew it was wrong, Harvey Levin sort of dropped a bomb without dropping a bomb. He said, you're going to hear something else coming that's going to kind of back that up. And Ashley Banfield said, so there's a bombshell you're going to drop. I'm going to be shocked if the bombshell isn't that he was getting ready to get out of town. If that is the truth, then they're really going to have to work on this narrative of he didn't know right from wrong. They're going to have to say he was terrified that everybody in this city was after him. And how are they going to do that? If you remember, TMZ said a month ago, right, or 6 months ago or whatever, very recently, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And there's been a lot of pushback from a lot of intelligent people about that. Now what they're saying is this. He was recently diagnosed with schizoid affective disorder, right? They call it PED. This is a very different thing than schizophrenia. This causes hallucinations. This causes mad up and down swings that will mirror things like bipolar disorder, where there will be bouts of mania that are just unbelievable. You know, the person can stay up for days on end feeling like they're having a really good time. Hey, Melanie, this is a much different diagnosis than schizophrenia. As I've said many times, schizophrenic people, they're not murderers. That's a bad thing to do to the people who are surviving with schizophrenia, because there are people that live fantastic lives and have no issues. Their medication takes care of stuff. They're spot on. I know at least a half a dozen people who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia who live as normal a life as anyone you'll ever meet. If you went to lunch with them, they would have to tell you that that has been a diagnosis, or I assure you, you would not have any idea. Well, he did. He did bail right away, Marilyn, and I will give you a scenario, right? So he, let's say he did this, allegedly, right? So he goes in and he murders his parents. He didn't stick around the house. That happens very often with people that don't understand right from wrong. They sit down on the couch with the dead body sitting next to them and they turn on HBO, because there's not that feeling of, man, oh man, have I done something wrong, right? He allegedly did something with the murder weapon because they can't find it. Then he got out of Dodge. We don't know if he tried to clean up the crime scene. We don't know any of that. But he left to go to a hotel where he was going to clean himself up. He put something up to cover the windows, just as a possibility. What if he checked all of the different times where he could get out of town and he needed to kill 4 hours? What if the next available train leaving that part of California wasn't going to leave for another 4 hours or 5 hours? He needed to kill time. And killing time for people who are who have just done something horrific is a hard thing to do, right? Trust me, I robbed banks. If you have to wait to leave town or whatever after robbing a bank, you sit there and go like this the entire time. And I wasn't killing anybody, right? So add to that mental illness, maybe some paranoia, the fact that he definitely used a lot of recreational drugs. Everyone says that. So he does what somebody in his shoes will absolutely do, which is haul ass to go get more drugs. He goes to a part of town that is infamous. I've been there. This is a place to go where if you want to cop dope of any kind, you can get it right there. And that's where he got picked up. So that's a possibility. I'm not saying it happened, but you understand what I'm saying? He got away from the crime scene. He changed his clothes out. He wasn't walking around bloody holding a knife, which, by the way, happens to people who don't understand the difference between right and wrong. There are situations where the 911 gets called, right, by a neighbor, and when the cops show up, the guy's holding his dead wife's hand and having a conversation with her. He may not realize what he just did was wrong. Maybe he believes that there was somebody living inside her that was satanic. He just killed that. Now he's having a conversation with his wife, the one he married. Okay, so we don't fully know. We don't have an idea of what's going on inside the crime scene. We don't know how brutal it was. We know it wasn't pleasant. He killed them with a knife. But if he has some kind of, we haven't seen the probable cause affidavit yet, have we? No, we have not. But we know what the probable cause was, right? Enough has been leaked that we know what it is. We know that he checked out that hotel room. He did it in a credit card in his name. It had blood all over the inside of that place. I promise you, they probably already tested that blood to make sure that it belonged to his parents. And again, I mean, everybody kind of saw this ticking time bomb waiting to happen. But here is the new time bomb, right? Here's the new bomb that TMZ is getting ready to tell you in a documentary that's going to come out tomorrow. I believe it's starting on Fox, then it's going to go to Hulu or some shit. But it comes out tomorrow. Not only are they going to talk about this new schizoid affective disorder, but they're going to say that $70,000 a month clinic that he was going to, it's their fault. This is not the fault of Nick Reiner. This is the fault of the medical community. He's also going to say that this is the fault of all of the rehabs that came before him. That's frightening because, and I'm not going to speculate, but apparently these rehabs saw things that they should have done something about. That's what they're hinting at. This is the shift. And I did a video on this maybe 6 videos ago on the Reiner stuff that I'm doing that said, let the blame game begin. They can't let Nick take the blame for this. You understand? They have to push this on somebody else because juries don't completely understand the concept of not guilty by reason of insanity. The McNaughton rule, no matter how much you explain it, and it's not super complicated, but juries don't want to buy that crap. So very often what happens instead is you need a scapegoat. You need somebody that you can blame this on. So if you're not guilty by reason of insanity because your mother used to dress you up as a woman when you were 3 years old and beat you with a belt anytime you talked like a boy, now we've got something that the jury can go, holy crap, right? That could drive somebody insane. I can see this. This maybe makes sense. The narrative is going to be this. He was on a cocktail of drugs, more than likely, because for this particular ailment, and I did a little bit of research on schizoid affective disorder, there is one new drug that they give people. However, even if you take that new drug, you're going to have to be treated for symptoms other than the main. So in other words, you treat the hallucinations, you treat the mood disorders. So he probably was on a cocktail of medications, stuff like SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, things like, depending on where you're going, right? They can give you drugs that are going to calm you down. But if that's, stealing your entire personality, they'll go to something like Wellbutrin or Bupurion, which is not an SSRI and tends to give people a little bit more of a mood elevation, right? It tends to make people a little bit more gregarious. They're already painting the narrative that his strange personality going back years completely aligns with schizoid affective disorder. And I better not screw that up, because a schizoid personality disorder isn't usually treated with drugs, believe it or not. Usually that's treated with stuff like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. It's treated with specific types of therapy where you work with psychologists to kind of take control of your brain, right? Take control where all of a sudden you're going off the rails. They do this for drug addicts. They do it for all kinds of people. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a beautiful thing, but it's not something you could do for what they're alleging that Nick had. But here's the kicker. They're going to say that Nick was right as rain, and this has been leaking out, right? This has been coming out. There are people who are saying that his parents were saying, you know what? Up until just recently, he was doing great. He was about as normal as we'd ever seen him. Certainly not what came out in the very early stages of this. We heard in the early stages of this that this was a guy that was scaring the crap out of everybody in his family. They said they were at their wits' end. They couldn't take this anymore. And it was also reported a lot that they said if he didn't get back on his medication and get off of drugs, that they were going to kick him out. Back on his medication and off of drugs. Very often, people with this disorder do not want to take their medication. They also said his psychotropic drugs made him violent. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And I'm going to get to that, because that is definitely what they're saying, is that a change in medication did this. But was he taking the medication? Because people with this disorder will do all kinds of stuff to convince the doctors that the side effects from this are too much. One of the medications that get used a lot is Risperdal, right? Risperidol. This gives eye tics. You end up looking off to the side, little head tics. It mirrors some of the symptoms of Tourette's. And when that happens, they give the person another drug to combat that. And the next thing you know, you're eating a handful of pills. If you start going through all of the different medications, and by the way, I'm familiar with a buttload of these medications, and I am, because a lot of people in prison take these or are prescribed these, right? There's a lot of psychotic people in prison. There's a lot of people with some very, very heavy kinds of disorders that they get treated for in prison. And I've talked about some of these before, but this is the cocktail of medications that normally happens. In the antipsychotics, you've got Invega, you've got Risperdal, Zyprexa, Seroquel, Abilify, Geodon, and Halidol. These are all really heavy medications that very often they get sold in prison to people that want to sleep. Halidol being really like the top of the food chain. If you go completely psychotic in prison, and I've told this story many times before, but I spent a long time in the segregated housing unit in Phoenix, Arizona, FCI Phoenix. And we had a black dude that lived across the hall from us. I was there 15 months, 16 months in the shoe. And this black dude that lived across from us would say, "Hey, boys," he'd yell down the tier. And we'd go, "What's up?" He'd go, "I'm going to flood my cell, man. Jam some stuff under your door," because if he floods his cell, the water eventually goes into the hall, then it goes into your cell. It destroys what meager possessions you're allowed to have in the shoe, right? So everybody puts their stuff off the ground. And we're like, "What are you doing? You pissed?" And he would say literally, "No, man, I need a Halidol holiday." They would come in with an injection and hit this dude, and he'd be unconscious for days, right? These are heavy, heavy drugs. That is the antipsychotic group. The The mood stabilizers would be lithium, Depakote, or Tegretol. Those are also drugs that are wildly abused in prison. People buy those. By the way, hit the thumbs up, hit subscribe. Seriously, this is I'm going to be covering this to the end. If you dig what I'm doing, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. Trying to be a YouTuber. And then they give antidepressants to almost all of these people. And you're looking at Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, Celexa, Lexapro, Cymbalta. What could possibly go wrong with any combination of those, including, for some people, things like clonazepam, right, which is Klonopin, really, really strong benzodiazepine. Lithium falls into another of those tranquilizer categories. But they're giving you medications that, for a lot of these people, they believe it takes away their reality. They have felt a specific way their entire life, and they kind of groove to it. And as I've said, and as everybody says, he self-medicates. He refuses to take the medication that they want to give him, and he takes a cocktail of street drugs that make him feel like he's in some kind of control, it shuts up the voices. And I don't mean he's hearing voices. I mean automatic negative thoughts, ants, your own little narrative that says your dad should have made you famous. You're a piece of shit. Everybody in your family is doing well. Your brother's in love. Your sister's in love. Everyone's successful. You can't do anything. You're a failure. They got rid of you at Family Guy. Meth, whatever he happened to be on, would take that away. He didn't want to be completely zoned out. And that's how most of these people feel. When you give somebody Halidol, you're not going to sit down and have a normal conversation with these people. Add to that some kind of benzo, and then add to that some kind of antidepressant. Good God, the number of medications that they probably had him on. But everyone says, including Harvey Levin, and we know Harvey wouldn't lie, but everybody says that he was doing fantastic right up until about a month before the murders. So sometime back in November, they decided, and this is how it's being put out by TMZ, and I'm sure this is a teaser to get us to go watch the damn documentary, but it is being put out there as, you ain't going to believe the reason that they gave for changing his medication. You are not going to believe the reason that they gave for changing the medication. What is odd is this. More often than not, people are not changed from one medication to another rapidly, right? Don't worry, Marilyn, I'll endure it and then come back and tell you what happened. I'm lurking. Jeebers, lithium, etc. Whoa, that's heavy duty. Seen mixed reactions, most not good. Anytime you start mixing these kind of medications and you don't do dope, you're in some serious danger. But we're going to hear that his family wanted him to take the new medication and he didn't want to. We're also going to hear, I promise you, this is going to be the narrative, that they forced him to take these medications. Those medications made him paranoid. He had hallucinations. They made him psychotic, because the narrative is going to get to, I promise, and lawsuits will be coming, that these people changed this medication for a reason they shouldn't. More often than not, they tweak the amounts of what you're taking. Now, we could speculate ad nauseum, right? We could spend the rest of the night speculating. Like maybe he went in there and went, yeah, you know what? Because the way that this is being put out there by Harvey Levin, you can watch the teasers, but he's making it sound like it's bizarre. The reasons that they took him off this are downright bizarre. Like him saying something like, hey, you know what? This stuff doesn't jive with the street drugs I'm doing. That would be insane. It would also be a massive lawsuit, especially for a dual diagnosis clinic. Allegedly, these people were also masters at treating people who had a mental disorder, a mental diagnosis, a mental illness in association with drug abuse. If that's the case, they didn't do a very good job on this. But the narrative going forward on this is going to be not guilty by reason of insanity, and it's the damn medical community's fault. It's the rehab center's fault. It's the $70,000 a month clinic that he was visiting. It's their fault. This isn't going to be put on Nick. And when Alan Jackson stepped down as the attorney, he walked outside and he went right up to the microphone, right? And he sold something that he's damn good at. He did a decent amount of righteous indignation, right? Print that. He said, this man is not guilty. He didn't say this man's innocent, right? Those are two very different things. Innocent means he was at a bar with some woman when the family was killed, and you're not going to find his prints anywhere at the scene. That's innocent. That isn't what he said. He said, when you hear all the details, when you see what's happening, he is not guilty. Not guilty can mean he butchered his mother and father, but the blame is put on whatever medications he was or was not taking. I assure you that This is more in line. Correct. They do small changes over time. The doctors, I mean, from what I have seen. Yeah. And from what I've researched, you don't go, all right, we're going to take you off all this crap and start you on something new. That is how it's being put out to us, that he was doing fine, everything was good, and we're not going to believe the reason. I threw out one. Another one, literally, that would be astounding was for them to say something like, well, these new drugs are a lot cheaper, right? For a clinic charging $70,000 a month, and for patients whose mom and dad are footing the bill and have $200 million laying around, that would be absolutely absurd. But whatever the reason is for a radical change, I'd be willing to bet the farm that the person that made that change wasn't a doctor. It was Nick. This is something that happens a lot, right? With this particular type of schizoid affective disorder. They manipulate doctors to get off medications that they are unhappy with. If those medications turn them into zombies, and I promise you, I spent a lot of time locked up with zombies, right? There was a guy, I've told this story before. They put him on a heavy antipsychotic. I was teaching a drug class in prison. And one day he walks in. Now, we're all guys, right? So there's less people to offend. But he had used the bathroom, didn't put away his junk, and just walked out into the meeting with his member hanging out. And he wasn't doing this to be offensive. He was a zombie. I had to walk up and go, hey, bud, you need to put that thing away and zip up your zipper. And his reaction was, oh, sort of tucked it away, zipped up his zipper. You see so many people in prison that walk around zombified because of the medications that they're on. And things like Seroquel are highly sought after. Literally, guys will take a Seroquel, put it in a plastic bag, and hit it with a lock, right? You can have a master lock in prison, little combination ones. And they'll hit it with a master lock and take one pill, and it'll take a month and a half for them to eat it because they'll eat it every night to go to sleep. Shards of it, itty bitty little shards of it. And there are guys taking 450 milligrams of this stuff a day. And they walk around. Aflac. He was one of the first school shooters in the U.S. He is an old man. He was doing time in the state of Nevada where he will be doing time forever. He is at the Northern Nevada Correctional Center. And he would walk to the chow hall, and he had the T-Rex arms, right? Where he does this one, right? And he would just walk down. And if you'd say, hey, how you doing, bud? He'd go, Ducky. They called him Aflac. The only two words he would say are Aflac and Ducky. And I assure you that isn't how he walked into prison. They absolutely drugged these people into comas. And I would imagine for Nick Reiner feeling very much entitled, feeling like the world owed him something, especially his parents. I don't think he'd want to be so drugged that he didn't feel like himself. They fight taking the medications constantly. Does that sound like a defense? He was on a cocktail, therefore plausible. He didn't know what he was doing due to the medication reactions. They're not going to say that. What they're going to say is the rapid change in medication turned him psychotic. That's what they're going to say. And the sad thing is this. In small cases, very small number of cases, these medications do turn people psychotic. Those are things that happen. They're antipsychotic drugs. Keeping in mind that all of these things are going off label, right? Truthfully. So there's antipsychotic medication, but to mix it with all of the other stuff, what you're doing is saying there isn't a drug that treats this guy. So we're going to put together a cocktail that does. And we're going to treat the symptoms in many cases that are caused by the antipsychotics in the first place. So if he's doing this one on the antipsychotic, they're going to give him bupropion, which is Wellbutrin, and they're going to give as much of it as they possibly can, because in many people, it gives you more of an upper kind of a feeling. Also, with these drugs, very often it turns off your junk. As a man, you're not going to get an erection. If you can, drugs like right now, Zoloft, right, which is sertraline, is the sertraline. People go off label, right? They go off label for sertraline now and write really small amounts of it for people that have premature ejaculation, because in normal doses, it makes it damn near impossible to actually pull the trigger, right? These are frustrating things for men. They're really frustrating things for a 32-year-old guy, right? This is a guy that if he's not going out and seeing women, he's probably beating that thing like it owes him money, right? So if you no longer have the ability to perform sexually in any way, those aren't drugs you're going to want to continue to take. But the narrative, I promise you, isn't going to be that Nick went in there and manipulated. Although, again, Harvey's teaser is you're not going to believe the reason they took him off of it. The reason might be that Nick said, all of these drugs make me feel like a zombie, or I don't want to take these drugs anymore. Yeah, this is a Seroquel does turn people into straight zombies. You're absolutely right. It's sad, but it's the truth. And a lot of these things do in and of themselves. Now put 6 of them together in a freaking cocktail, and as Marilyn points out, the meds that are there to help the mental health issues mixed with street drugs is a toxic situation. And let me explain this so that it makes sense to people, because I get a bunch of crap in comments about this. Let's say you're taking a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI. So, Zoloft is one, right? All of those that I read to you, those are all SSRIs. If you're taking an SSRI, what it's doing in the brain is regulating how much serotonin can get released or brought back into the brain, depending on your condition, right? Throw in there, Lacey Silver, good to see you. Your family's still in my prayers, hon. Throw in now methamphetamine, where you're going to get a absolute flood of every brain chemical that your brain stores up, including what? Serotonin. So you're flooding your brain with serotonin, and you're taking a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. This is a cocktail. This is a recipe for freaking disaster. Now, as a dual diagnosis clinic, you would assume they were piss testing this dude on the regular, right? They should have been doing all kinds of stuff to make sure this kid wasn't doing street drugs, because street drugs in association or mixing with the cocktail that they were giving him, this is somebody that could absolutely become psychotic. Sounds like he was on Prozac. Cinnamon Girl, that's one of the drugs that is listed for this disorder. I'll go over these again real quick for people that just got here. But this cocktail, so they start out with, come on now, why do things, there we go. They start out with antipsychotics. That's going to be the first thing they treat with. And you're looking at Invega, Risperidol, Zyprexa, Seroquel, Abilify, Geodon, and Halidol. And the strongest of that being probably Halidol. That's a very rugged drug. I can never say that right. Clozapine. I want to say clonazepam. Clozapine. That is for treatment-resistant cases. Mood stabilizers are then used in conjunction with that. You have lithium, you have Depakote, and you have Tegretol, which is oxycarbazepine or some stuff, and valproic acid, I think, is what the Depakote is. And Depakote, people hear this because sometimes it's used to treat people with seizures. Sometimes take Depakote, but all of these things being taken at the same time. Then you've got antidepressants, because when you take away the high highs of the person's normal routine, right? These aren't people that feel, oh, today's a good day. They go, let's clean things, right? They go into a manic stage that is unbelievable, or they go into a depressive stage. It mimics bipolar, but 10 times worse, right? Throw in hallucinations and everything else. The neutralizer says, I'm hearing no therapy, just drugs. Well, that's how they're going to paint this, I promise you. And it may have been the case, which is terrifying if you think about it. And yeah, Judy Jetson, it does make you think that there's a chance the brain would explode. Now, for antidepressants, you have Prozac, fluoxetine, I think is what that's called. I could be wrong if someone wants to correct me on that. Zoloft, which is sertraline. Paxil, I cannot remember what that one is. I think something like that. And Lexapro and Cymbalta, right? These are the other drugs that they wouldn't be giving them all of them, but they would be giving them a combination of mood stabilizers, antidepressants, and antipsychotics. That is normally what is given for this particular kind of disorder. Again, you throw in that they're going to say you have mood problems, you also have hallucinations. When you have hallucinations, those can be you seeing things. They can also be you hearing things. These kind of things make not guilty by reason of insanity way more probable if they can sell it to a jury. Because if you're hearing, right, your dad's voice in your ear saying, you've got to kill me and your mother, we can't get rid of the demons, right? Honestly, when someone starts to hallucinate, he may have seen this, and I'm not buying any of this. I'm just telling you what the kind of defenses that people are going to be coming up with. They can say, Thorazine is very rarely used anymore, Christine. Very rarely used. Too many lawsuits. Seroquel isn't used a whole lot anymore either because of a lot of lawsuits. But yeah, very few doctors, I think, are still writing prescriptions for Thorazine. It has some really hellacious side effects. In fact, there is a syndrome that is caused specifically by that. And someone will write it down because I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But if you're hallucinating, I mean, Nick, in theory, they could say he walked up into the bedroom to say to his parents, all right, fine, I'm going to take my medication. And dad rose up out of the bed in spirit form and attacked him. when you start talking about someone who's seeing things that aren't there, now you really start wondering whether or not the not guilty by reason of insanity is a possibility. Rue, you are so kind. Thanks for your research, Tommy. Not easy work. Appreciated. I appreciate you, Rue, and I hope the weather is beautiful in Mexico. It is lovely down here. I'm telling you, it's been fantastic. And even though it's in season and it's warm as hell, there's no one here right now. It's you can walk down the Malecon. It's actually very civilized. Got a little wild over the holiday, but it's very civilized right now. I remember being on Ritalin when first diagnosed with ADHD. That freaked me out. I had bad reactions, have lost memories, etc. Aspen and Dexy. Oh yeah, there you go. Dextromethamphetamine and Adderall is. I'm not familiar with Aspen. You may have been shooting for Adderall. Still, better still getting there. Can understand. Still no excuse. There is no excuse, and here's why. Because from what we already know, this kid was, and he's a kid, don't believe it in the comments, 32, he is their kid, and he killed his parents. This young man was abusing drugs in a huge way, right? Going out of his way to seek drugs. $10,000 a month allowance, and you would think that would stack up enough money to maybe hire your own attorney. I don't think he hired this attorney, but there's been a lot made about whether or not he had a trust from the death of his grandfather, Carl Reiner. Whether or not that's the truth isn't something that we're going to know for a while. Hey, Cinnamon Girl, we're not going to know that for a while. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. But whatever the case may be, I will put cash on the fact that this was a cash issue. This wasn't about a conflict of interest. This wasn't if you argue with your client, if your client goes, F you, I don't want you around anymore, more often than not, the attorney isn't going to stroll up to the microphone and talk about how he supports this person to the bitter end and how, make no mistake, he is not guilty of murder. This is going to come back to be about money. And I'm not bad-mouthing Alan Jackson for that. I mean, holy hell, if you get paid $10 million, for a case and you find out you're not going to get paid, period, the odds of you sticking around are pretty slim, right? That doesn't make the guy a scumbag. It just means that the family is got to be really struggling with this. Picture any family dynamic. If you have brothers and sisters, think about this for a second. You love your brother, wholeheartedly. You grew up with him. You love him. You know he's a damaged creature, right? But he killed your parents. That's a cocktail of emotions that I don't think any of us can wrap our brain around. At least I hope none of us can wrap our brain around. I hope that no one has enjoyed that here. But what a horrific life experience for the siblings. And the prospect of just what this is going to mean, because this is OJ, right? This is bigger than Karen Reed. This is one of those cases that is going to be really a big deal, right? It's Diddy sized. Can you imagine what it must feel like for them to get up every morning? It takes a very dedicated person to not go look at this kind of information. It's like when someone's making bad videos about you on YouTube and calling you everything under the sun. It's hard to not go look at negative content about you. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline. And this is getting so much publicity that they don't have to go to YouTube. They don't have to go to TikTok. They don't have to go anywhere. They're going to hear the stories. They're going to hear the stories of, and people speculating that Rob Reiner probably molested his kid. Do you know how many videos have been made that claim Rob Reiner was a child molester? Right? Way to just shit on the dead, right? No respect at all. But there are videos cranking out every single day that this had to be the father molesting the son. This is why this kind of rage was built inside. I don't buy that. I don't think that checks out. Now, if TMZ is going to come out and say the problem with the rehabs are he told 9 different rehabs that he was molested as a kid, I don't buy that. I don't think that's what we're going to hear. People that normally do that kind of thing to their kids, don't let them get near doctors, because doctors have an oath that forces them to call the police anytime a child says that he was a victim. Or if someone says they're going to kill themselves or they're going to kill someone else, there is an ethical duty to go and do that. Sigley Nation says, I call BS. It's fairly obvious that he did everything that he could do for Nick. And I understand why you're saying that, right? But I think what people mean is they did everything that they believed right. They were willing to spend all kinds of money. They were willing to send him off to rehabs. They were willing to do all of these things, right, to help. Was that helpful? Probably not, maybe the best course of action. But you don't get a playbook, when your kid is born on, here's what happens if he has schizoid affective disorder. In fact, every single case is going to be wildly difficult. It's difficult on the family, and it's hell on the person, right? It's hell on Nick, because they're going to do everything they can to get rid of. You know what? I have not seen that. We'll have to wait and see what happens on that. He may have been sexually assaulted at those rehabs, wilderness therapy places he went to rather than by his dad. That is a possibility, and it's one that we might hear because, and again, this is Harvey Levin, man. He's not going to come out and go, hey, I got a documentary coming out tomorrow, and this isn't, there's nothing really huge and newsworthy. There's no bombs or anything else, right? That's probably not how it's going to get done, but they're leading us to believe that there are bombshells that we're going to hear about what happened in these rehabs. Christine Micro says, I have the disorder, and if I smoke the wrong kind of pot, I'm in trouble. Well, imagine multiplying that by 1,000, right? Because so if you're smoking weed, we have cannabinoid receptors in the brain. It's not quite like meth, where meth is just going to go and release all of your brain chemicals at once. So I would imagine, and I would be terrified of marijuana because of it as well. That's very intelligent. I don't think Nick did a lot of stuff that was intelligent. Rob Reiner said he knows better than the doctors. What he said was he trusted people that had diplomas and had degrees because they had a lot of letters after their name. But he knows his son better than a doctor would. I think that was the quote. But again, you might know your son, but you don't know the disorder. And the disorder can turn your son into somebody that I promise you don't know. And sadly, he found that out on the 15th or the 14th of December, right? And I'm not taking any joy in that. I'm not being a smartass. But you think that you know your kid. You've watched him trash rooms. You've watched him destroy things, kick doors off of hinges, grab people. But people never believe it's going to escalate to that kind of violence. And this is one of the saddest things about these kind of mental illnesses is that you can go 10 or 15 times, right, watching the person be really destructive toward things, but not people. So you get in your head that I ain't got a whole lot to worry about. It's not like he's ever going to hurt us. And as a parent, I mean, I have a couple of kids. I'm sure that most of us here do. It's almost inconceivable for most parents to believe that their child could try to kill them. That's an inconceivable notion. Yeah, he rages. He broke a television set. He curses a lot. He gets pissed off at school. But this is gonna actually turn violent to us is something that is hard for a parent to understand. And I've talked about this before, but there was a guy that there was a murder of a father that was actually on film because the guy had his the camera on his computer, on his laptop was set up. And his kid came in to kill him with a baseball bat while he was cleaning his guns. He had one in front of him loaded. And the kid came in with the bat like this. And he went, set the gun back down and waited for the kid to hit him in the head. Because most of us, I mean, even defending yourself against your kid, you know what I mean? Thank God I've never had to deal with any of this. But I can't imagine what it must be like to have to hit your child. And I don't mean spank them. I mean, ball up a fist and try to defend yourself from someone who's acting psychotic. It had to be the horror of this is the last minutes of their life. One of them watched the other get killed. There's no way around that. He didn't kill them both at the same time. More than likely, more than 1,000% chance, Michelle Reiner watched Rob get murdered. As men, we just sort of baked into who we are, right? This is one of those situations where you're going to attack the biggest threat. Rob Reiner, even at his age, would have been the biggest threat. Certainly would have been more of a opponent, so to speak, in a murder than would have been Michelle. It's horrifying to think what her last minutes were like. It's also horrifying to think what Rob's were. This is sad. And what's even more sad is if they were still here right now, we would have to believe that they would still be supporting him. That's kind of who they are. Tina says, yes, but the night before, Rob Reiner said that he is afraid that Nick Reiner would harm him. That has been reported wildly in the news, right? I mean, and by wildly, I don't mean inaccurately. I mean that so many sources have reported that he said that. possibly at the party. I also was able to find earlier accounts that Michelle Reiner had allegedly said to a couple of friends that she hung out with that, yeah, I'm concerned that he may end up hurting us. That would absolutely, unfortunately, still jive with the narrative, right? If they took him off the medications he was taking and then put him on a whole new set of medications a month ago, then what everyone is saying, and in fact, let me tell you some of the quotes. His new medication put him out of his head. His new medication made him psychotic and dangerous. These are quotes that are already coming out. And I struggle, I think a lot of people do, with the concept of not guilty by reason of insanity. So for me, the best that I can do, and I think this is probably the best that anyone can do if they want to be logical, is that burden of proof being the McNaughton rule. And the McNaughton rule or the McNaughton law is pretty damn simple, right? Did he know right from wrong? Did he know that what he was doing to his parents was wrong? And Harvey Levin wants to argue this point. He already has. He argued with Ashley Banfield on this and said, it is possible to know that what you were doing was wrong and still be not guilty by reason of insanity. I got to cry bullshit on that. If you knew killing them was wrong, you need to go to prison for the rest of your life. You don't need to go to a psychiatric facility. You don't need to go anywhere else. No, she was not alive at any point. She died in her bed. It was reported early on that there was a dying declaration made in an ambulance. It was bullshit. The story was retracted. It was somebody in LA that leaked it to Billy Bush, the guy that has this show called Hot Mic with Billy Bush. Billy Bush broke the story. Megyn Kelly ran with it. Both of them have recanted. In fact, I think they recanted a couple of days later. They died within a minute of one another. They died within a minute or two of the attack, which would lead you to believe that they either got him in the ticker. I'm not trying to be a bummer, people, but this is what we talk about, right? They either got him in the ticker or they were able to cut a couple of really huge arteries, which caused them to exsanguinate. But even that usually is about a 4-minute process. That he may have stabbed them directly in the chest. We don't know. There's a lockdown on most of this information, so we won't know. Harvey thinks he knows everything about everything. Boy, there's a lot of truth to that. And if he doesn't, he'll lie to you about it. If a person has witnessed to this situation, and if on California changed its laws, Nick would have been put away, would have saved the Reiner's life. You know what? I think that there's a lot about this that's worth talking about. There really is, because there are so many places along the way that this could have been prevented. And one of the reasons that I talk about this case as much as I do, and I'm going to continue to do so, is this is a cautionary tale, right? There's 350 people, 360 people that are in here listening to this. There are some of you who have relatives in this situation. And if we continue to say to ourselves, you know what, they would never hurt me. Yeah, they're out of control, but they're never going to hurt me. Put the mask on yourself. Take care of you before you take care of anybody else, no matter what their disorder is. Your job is to make sure that nothing bad happens to them. If you get your throat cut, you can't make sure that nothing bad happens to them. Worked as Harvey's researcher, super sweet boss, and vegan, but he's a lawyer. Just doing his job. You make a good point. And thank you for the insight. Harvey absolutely is an attorney, right? He is. And unfortunately, he's also an attorney now that has a huge ass platform, and he hangs out with a lot of other attorneys. He's had an opportunity to talk to people like Mark Garagos, who by all accounts plays golf and hangs out with Alan Jackson. And if Alan Jackson thought he was taking this case all the way to the finish line, then when Harvey Levin would come on and say, sources close to the case, I mean, that had to have come from Alan Jackson. I don't think that some of the leaks, especially about what were being said, TMZ leaked that he was going to leave the case probably 25 minutes before the world knew about it, which means that Harvey's got a source somewhere that's feeding him info. And that's the nature of TMZ, isn't it? Right? The problem is half of what he leaks is bullshit. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. He's also really good at what he does. As much as he's a lawyer, he's an incredible performer. They were asking him, I think it was Ashley Banfield that was asking him, and she said, have you talked directly with Alan Jackson about his reason for leaving? And Harvey went, his reasons for leaving, right? Whether or not he talked to him, he wanted us to think, I talked to him, but I'm not going to say that. And if you watch the delivery of it, it was masterful. Now, whether or not he really talked to him, I don't know. but he sure as shit made us think he did. And that's I guess what he does for a living, right? He is the National Enquirer of 2025. This is the guy that told us that the White House was going to release Diddy. You remember that story? There's all kinds of BS that they put out, and it's usually designed to get the people to believe in one direction or another. Oddly enough, it always seems to be tied to a case where Harvey Levin knows that attorney that's running the case. And for me, that's an issue. Why did Alan Jackson leave the case? The only thing logical in this, there's three things that make a defense attorney leave a case, especially at about that juncture. One of them is he ain't getting paid, right? He's not going to get paid anymore. He's not going to do a case of this size for free. The other would be a conflict of interest. And I promise you, this is a guy that researched every single chance of being a conflict of interest before he signed onto the paper. Every defense attorney does. That is standard operating procedure. Get a list of all of the people that could be involved and make sure, thank you again, Rue, your support means the world to me. Get everybody that's in the case and figure out what your association is with all of them before you sign off. This guy's a pro. It wasn't a conflict of interest. He could have had his client say, I don't agree with your representation. They're not at that stage yet. This is going to come back to cash. And as somebody had pointed out astutely earlier, he was on suicide watch, right? He didn't make a call and go, hey, man, I need your help. He didn't call Alan Jackson. So somebody in the family had to have. So Alan Jackson gets called. If you listen to Alan Jackson's press conference carefully, what did he say when he came out? He said, I got the call in New York. I came out here immediately. From the moment that I came out here, my team and I have worked literally around the clock. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like somebody justifying huge amounts of money that have already being asked for, right? He's $1,000 an hour guy. If he says, I've been working 20 hours a day since the 14th of December on this case, and I got 6 other lawyers that did, maybe they just went, good God, what is this going to cost us? Nick gives off narcissistic vibes. He laughed and bragged about destroying his parents' guest house, laughed and bragged about drugs and getting crazy. And those are going to come back to haunt him. They're going to come back to haunt him. He bragged about trashing a place to fake being mentally ill so that he could get a different medication. That ain't going to be good. Sarah Quill for sleep. Is Xanax the devil? What? I'm sorry about that. No, you're good. What do you think? Why do you think so many attorneys eventually leave the prosecutor's office to become defense attorneys? Because there's no money in being a prosecutor, and there's a shitload of money in being defense attorneys. I married a defense attorney, right? Here's what happens. They walk out to the parking lot and they get in their Chevy and they watch the defense attorney that they just sat across from. They did the exact same amount of work, right? They did it with a just cause, and they watched that guy get into a Ferrari, right? Or a Porsche, and he's wearing a $70,000 wristwatch. There's just not enough money in it. If you're going to put that much time and effort in there, right? Why the hell not? Go for the cash. And they learn a lot in the prosecutor's office. They learn the inner workings of prosecutions, and then they can go over to the other side. Usually the greatest defense attorneys at one time or another were all prosecutors. Drug addiction does mimic narcissism. How often I think, oh yeah, no question. This is absolutely the truth. The podcast clips are probably partly him trying to fit in with those guys and their constant jokes about how crazy they got being high, glamorizing addiction. That's a great point, by the way. Haas Verbat. That is a great point. Even if he is legitimately a problem, here's the problem with the drug addiction and all that. It's not a defense. Nobody can go into court and go, I got so drunk I killed him. Really? Did somebody hold you down, put a bottle of bourbon upside down in your throat and make you drink 32 ounces of it? Because you took an action to start to drink. Everything that happened after you did that, that's on you. And it's the same thing with drugs. You can't go in and go, I was wasted on drugs. You can do that after you've been sentenced. You can do it as a mitigating circumstance after you've been found guilty. You can do it as a mitigating circumstances. Hello, Heather. But to say, I'm not guilty because I was taking meth. No, you took meth. That was your choice. Everything that happened after that, that's on you. In the eyes of the law, that's the way it goes. Now you're found guilty. You can go in and say, I never would have done that if it wasn't for the drugs. And the judge can go, okay, we're going to sentence you to 30 years, but I'm going to mandate that you spend at least 5 of that in some kind of a drug program inside prison. It's a mitigating factor, but it's not one that will get you off of the hook. The podcast clips. Yeah, this is a great comment. If you go, and this has happened to me, I promise you, I've gone on podcasts with people, and before you go on, you say, all right, here's the deal. I don't want to talk about the number of banks I robbed. I don't want to talk about all of the crimes I've done. I want to talk about the redemption arc. I want to talk about me helping people get sober. I want to talk about what I do on the lifeboat. I don't want to talk about my criminal history all for the entire show. And they'll go, yeah, no problem. And then the next day, the thumbnail comes out and it says, master criminal steals this much money. And you go, oh, shit. You know, when you go on there, you're expected to sort of do the tap dance thing. And these are, you know, that was a podcast that, although they talk about drugs or they frame it as a show that wants to talk about sobriety, they glorified the shit out of drug use. I'm sorry, they did. If you go and listen to the Dopey podcast, it's not what you would call therapeutic, right? They sort of giggle at a lot of those stories, and it's not particularly healthy, in my opinion, and it certainly would cause him to kind of feed into that. So is Nick getting a public defender? He has one right now. He has a woman from the public defender's office. Now, very often that's done as a stop-gap measure. If you fire your attorney, they don't let you just flounder with no attorney. There's paperwork that has to be filed. Somebody needs to be representing your interests. So could they go and find a new attorney for him? I think there's a damn good chance. But for the time being, he's going to have a public defender. And this brings up an interesting point. Even if he is found guilty with special circumstances for death, he's still going somewhere, right? Yeah. I mean, no matter what happens, Neutralizer, no matter what happens to Nick Reiner, he ain't getting out. You understand? If he's found not guilty by reason of insanity, it doesn't mean you get to go home. It means that they're going to have to send you someplace and try to get you sane, at which point you may or may not have a shot at getting out. People love to go, well, John Hinckley Jr. got out. John Hinckley Jr.'s case was really unique, really, really unique. And he spent a hell of a lot of time in prison before he got out. It would put Nick at a really old man if he were to just match what happened there. But it's hard to find 5 examples of that. That's why everybody says John Hinckley Jr., because most people that get found guilty of this are going to die in prison. They're just going to die in a different kind of prison. And I'll be honest, I've done time, right? I spent a decent amount of time in prison. I would much rather be in a prison than a psychiatric prison where everybody in there might think they're Caesar. And I'm not being a wise ass, but there are people in there that are really going through it, right? There's a lot of people that have said this. There are a lot. You're welcome to Neutralize. There are a lot of people who have said this. I wonder if Nick is so jealous and insecure that he believed it was the only way he could be more famous than his father or grandfather, or famous, period, right? Nick should plead guilty and request a bench trial. Yeah, there are laws in place to make sure that people like him can't do stuff like that, right? This is the comment I've been waiting for, right here. This is the comment. Thank you, Chrysler George. With a cheap-ass public defender, Nick is screwed. He's done. I'm not putting you on the spot, but you sound like somebody that might have been through the system. There's a joke running inside prison, right, that says, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you by the state. They will have just gotten out of school. They will be inept. They will have no budget, and you're going to get screwed. That's kind of how it goes down. It does. Now, there are great public defenders. Great public defenders become great defense attorneys. They practice in there. They get good at what they do. And because they're trying to get good, every case they take, they treat like they're Alan Jackson. I've had a couple of public defenders that were absolutely incredible, right? I've also had some paid attorneys that I dropped a fortune on that sucked. But here's the problem. This doesn't come down to, is this woman as good an attorney as Alan Jackson? Alan Jackson would have had a budget this big. He could have hired people to come in and talk about this disorder. He could have hired big name people that have testified in bunches of trials who are excellent. When a prosecutor gets up and tries to tear them apart, they don't lose their cool. They talk like this. They make the prosecutor sound stupid. And they say things like, well, with all due respect, Mr. Prosecutor, I've treated 300 people with this disorder. Have you? Right? Those kind of expert witnesses can cost $250,000 a piece. Right? If you want to call in 2 or 3 of them, okay, the public defender's office, they're not going to go down and go, hey, I want to hire this guy, and this guy. They're going to look at her and go, yeah, that's not going to happen. Sorry, that just doesn't happen. It happens with a high-dollar defense attorney, right? Yeah, a bench trial where the judge makes the decision would probably be in his best interest. Again, though, when you have capital cases, it's like I talk about this a lot. If Nick went into his arraignment and said, I want to plead guilty, they'd go, oh, no. I promise you, I've watched it happen in the federal system so many times. If you show up at your arraignment and go, I'd like to plead guilty, the judge will go, not today. Tell you what, we're going to enter a plea of not guilty for you so that you have time to talk to an attorney, figure out all, because I'm not taking, Because what's going to happen is if somebody pleads guilty that day, they're going to start filing appeals real quickly thereafter, right? Chrysler George says a plea deal is most likely. You know what, though? What do you put on the table? This is a double homicide. That's special circumstances. You could put on the table, we'll take the death penalty off, right? That's something. But here's the reality. For that death penalty to go through, they would have to get Romy and Jake to sign off on it. And they're not going to. They're not going to say, kill my brother. It's just not going to happen. So the death penalty, while it's still on the table, doesn't carry a hill of shit in California anyway. There's a moratorium declared by the governor. They'd have to have a new governor who wanted to kill people because nobody's been killed in California in a damn long time. It's just not going to happen, right? But Nick's big problem right now is without a really high dollar attorney, there ain't going to be any expert witnesses. I mean, there'll be experts, but they're going to be somebody down from the local, somebody willing to come in and do it for 10 grand or someone willing to come in to do it in 5 grand because there is a budget for public defenders. It just ain't a lot of money. And they have to go in front of the court and argue for it. And this just isn't going to be something that you're going to be able to defend on a public defender's kind of a budget. This is the kind of case that you need Alan Jackson to bill you $10 million so that he can go out and find the best of the best. If this were Alan, so give just another example. If this is Alan Jackson's going to send private investigators to all of those allegedly 18 different rehabilitation centers. I've also heard out of the kid's mouth in an interview where he said he's been to dozens of them. So, I mean, maybe again, he's just trying to play it up, but let's say it's 18. So you're going to send out private investigators to those 18 places. There's your budget. Now you need to bring in some really high dollar expert witnesses to paint an image so that the people on the jury can understand this. Because to the average American, when they hear he's pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, they go, oh, bullshit. I mean, that's what we do as people, right? It is. We want somebody to pay for killing 2 people. I do. I understand the McNaughton rule. I still want this kid to pay for what he did. Maybe that makes me cold-hearted, but it makes me pretty damn normal because most people who look at this don't go, oh, poor Nick. Poor Nick. He had a $120,000 a year allowance at the age of 32, right? Poor kid. His parents paid all of his bills. So that $120,000 a month allowance didn't have to go to rent, didn't have to go to car payments, didn't have to go to anything. Now, allegedly, the guy didn't drive. It's not a shocker, though. He certainly had enough money to get around. He wanted to be famous. Rich was already covered. That's true. Jodi Arias got lucky with her young baby, now famous attorney. You know what? Jodi Arias, I should do a couple of shows on Jodi Arias. She was a fascinating case, wasn't she? Jodi Arias didn't possess a lot of skills in life. One of them was making men really kind of go head over heels for her. And I believe she was able to pull that off to some degree with that attorney as well. And this is just, she really was something else. She's unique. Suitcase Sarah is another one that they're kind of fun to talk about. Ozzy and Jack Osborne, they've seen in recovery circles out there, never Nick. I don't believe that Nick did a hell of a lot of therapy, unfortunately. If he did, he certainly was doing it quietly. Jodi was very charismatic. She was. She met the man that she killed doing multi-level marketing. He kind of got to stand up and talk in front of people. And she was certainly able to communicate. Yes, please. Who is Jodi? Jodi Arias was a woman that killed her ex-lover when she found out that he no longer wanted any interest in her. She's a really strange girl. She changed her story, a couple of hundred times. Thanks again, Rue. You are fantastic. Did this show sponsored by Rue, my friend in Mexico. Christine, that's interesting to me. It doesn't mean anything necessarily, but it's interesting. If nobody's ever seen them, they're seeing other people. Usually you're going to run into people in this kind of situation. Carla Homolka, holy hell, there's the name I haven't heard in a long time. And her boyfriend's name was, someone's going to put it up there before I get it. But they were a fascinating couple as well. Canadians. And just evil as hell. She and her, Paul Bernardo, thank you, Cindy G. Paul Bernardo was married to Carla Homolka, and they decided that they were going to have a threesome with her sister, but they weren't going to tell her about it. They were going to drug her, and in the process, managed to accidentally kill her. Jody's a disaster, shot her boyfriend in the face and said she gave him the nose job he always wanted. She was really an unusual chick. And in the interrogation room, she started doing yoga, handstands against the wall, and simply going through the trash, checking out what people had blown in their snot rags. Just subbed. See that? There's one. There's one. It's that YouTube thing. Do me a favor, people. I'm coming to an end on this. I'm going to keep covering this thing. I'm going to watch that shit show of a documentary that's going to go on tomorrow by TMZ. And then it's probably going to take 4 or 5 hours to chase down all of the things that they say, because with all due respect, sometimes it's just, they say a lot of things that, I don't know, that don't come out to be true. They will definitely push sensationalism over, over facts, especially if it helps one of their friends. The Diddy situation has really made me distrust them in a way that I can't possibly explain. It's just one of those things. Thank you again for tuning in. Please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button if you hadn't, and hit the thumbs up on the way out. That one's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Rue, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it, hon. All right, people, between now and the next time I see you, keep tuning back in, right? And be kind to one another. I'm Tommy. God bless. I will see you on the next one. Oh, you know what? Bob it. Yeah, I could absolutely do that.